First of all, we design by Charrette. How many of you have worked in a Charrette format before? A couple, three? That's a higher percentage than what I normally see. Maybe you guys are architects, or maybe you guys have been on building committees where somebody employed that. Most architects don't like to design by Charrette because it's a terrifying way to design. I mean, it is. It really is. I've done 280 of them, and I'm still terrified by them. A charrette, by the way, is the French word for little chariot. And in the Beaux-Arts School of Design in the 1700s, the first organized school to train architects, they used to roll this cart, little chariot cart, through the studio, and if your drawings weren't on the cart at the appointed time, you received a failing grade. So to an architect, it means make decisions, get to it, don't linger, don't sit there and pontificate with yourself, get to it. And so we designed this way, and we design on site with a group of people, including the general contractor, in a very collaborative way. We've done this many, many times. I would tell you that of the 800 projects, probably 99.9% of them have been designed by Charrette, where we go to the site to design. What we're really looking for is a full range of input from some of the people who are involved in the ministry. We want them engaged. We want them involved in the process. And so we get them around the table. We want a demographic mix. We want young people. Now we realize that a lot of these building committees are filled out by people who are a little bit older, who have some experience, maybe some direct experience. Maybe they've been in the building trades, or they've been in management or something like that. Maybe they're stakeholders in terms of financial positions on the project. They're typically not the 20-somethings. Put some 20-somethings into that meeting. You're going to gain some insight. The way that younger people think is very different than the way that the baby boomers think. I consider myself a progressive baby boomer. But I've been trained in some ways by the millennials, and vice versa, by the way. It goes both directions. Millennials, I have found to be very open to discussions and intergenerational discussions. They want that. My generation, not so much. I was raised in the 60s and the 70s. Old people didn't have anything good to say. Right? We were out of there. Young people have some contribution to be made, and an insistence that they be involved in those discussions. Very important. Get them in there if you can afford to do that. Day one, we talk about vision. There's actually a homework stage that goes on ahead of the charrette, but day one is largely talking about vision. It amazes me, in light of the discussions that we had earlier about establishing vision for churches, how many times I walk into a charrette discussion and somebody says, "Can you tell us what the vision for our church is?" No. No, I can't. I can tell you what XYZ vision is in this community over here, in that community that we worked with over there, but no, you tell me. So getting prepped for this is going to be crucially important. Understanding what your purpose is. Understanding what our purpose in life is unfortunately, something that takes our whole lives to learn sometimes. The younger we can figure that out, the better we're off. But for a church, it's crucially important for us to ask those questions ahead of the charrette. Prepare ourselves through either the StratOps process that Matt was talking about, or the Unstuck group, or some of the other ones that are around. These are very good tools. Or internally, just ask yourselves, afford yourselves a conversation. Oftentimes, I'll get before a group and the staff has a really good idea of vision and purpose, but the transference to the larger group hasn't been made completely yet. And so that first discussion is usually guiding people through intergenerationally how we get to a common vision. Because at the end of that night, I want to walk away and have a pretty good idea what I'm designing. I know there's always little spaces that are in flux, but I want to know. So that by the time, we will flash diagrams like this up there to talk about adjacencies and space sizes and so forth. I want to get reactions to those kind of things. That's very helpful on the first night for people to have something to react to. We'll put it on the site plan and talk about site arrangements, site-related issues. Those are very positive discussions that we can talk about how things are going to work. Or in the context of an existing building. Sometimes we'll bring the plans in for the existing building and do that. By the time I get to night two, we're looking at something like, this is one that we just finished. Ryan, you saw this one over in Harrisonville. This was a project that we did that they came in the very first night, and we realized, well ahead of this, but we realized that they had a X for a budget and they had 2X for what their needs were. So we had to come up with a strategy to essentially cut half of the square footage out of the building and come up with a progressive plan. They decided to do a preschool, whoops, I'm going to go back. They decided to do a preschool with a group out of Nashville that we are affiliated with through our sustainable organization in order to afford themselves the income. So this whole portion over here is going to help pay for the next subsequent building phase, which is a 3-year building, and they'll eventually get to this building. We're not going to get there. I think I've killed it. There it is. We're going to get to a plan that evolves over a period of time. So that first discussion is big concepts about phasing and how we master plan things and move things through in that regard. So we will eventually get to a building like this, and eventually that will turn into a multi-purpose room, and then we'll go on. By the time we get to the second and third nights, we're showing them the way that the building is going to look. I want to get some reactions out of those folks. I like to do it on the second night, and I oftentimes afford myself. I'm working long distance with folks back in my home office to derive these kinds of images. I want to be able to hear what people's thoughts are. Some people will inevitably raise their hands and say, we really like that. And others will raise and say, that's a little bit too modern for us, or it doesn't look like a church. We need it to look like a church. Everybody's different on that continuum. Everybody's got a little bit different standard. That's a discussion we have to navigate. I remember one down in Louisiana that we had a discussion one night with a group of people that were debating whether to put a cross on their building. Now, to some of you that seems silly. To some people, they look upon the cross as a barrier to bringing the non-church community in. And this was a real discussion. There was 45 minutes of argument going on in a group of 60 people, and it evolved down to 2 individuals in that room. They were sitting in a big U shape. Young guy over here saying, we can't put a cross the way that we have traditionally done on this building. It's a barrier to too many people on the outside. And a guy over here saying, I'm not going to fund the project, an older fellow, my age, I'm not going to fund the project if we don't have a cross on the building. He had drawn his line in the sand, he had drawn his line in the sand. Father-in-law, son-in-law, by the way. So I was navigating through waters that were a lot more treacherous than I realized at the time. But eventually we ended up with a solution that was a very modern interpretation, a sculptural interpretation of a very cool cross that bridged it. It bridged it for the younger guy that said, we can't do something not cool, and the older guy who said, I need to see a cross. So getting people in the room to talk about these issues can be crucially important. How do we bridge those intergenerational expectations? Renderings are going to be a very important component of getting buy-in from people.